We're now going to continue building on our index.js, and when we left off, we were inside of our counter function and about to build this conditional here that will switch modes if the timer ends, so we're looking for that. So that is what the conditional is going to look for, and if that succeeds, then we're going to go into some additional code. So we have our array. We have also our index we're using, which is our clock array that was passed in. So the way we're doing this is looking at big time, and if it is equal to 0, then we can go ahead and proceed with this. So what we're going to do is a return val, which is going to play sound. It's another function that is yet to be built, and we're going to do current running clock, and that will go back to -1. So again, a reset here, or an invalid clock basically, and what we want is a clear interval, and that is going to get passed in the array with the index and our countdown ID, and from there we're going to look at return val, see if it is a -1, and you can see this -1 is going to be coming off of this, so whatever is happening in here besides a sound is also going to return a value, and that's going to set -1. So we're going to do an alert. So we're displaying a message, and we're also playing a sound. So in our alert, we're going to say work has been finished for the running clock. And I'm just going to say up here a comment on this counter. So a counter function is used for work purposes. So while we are dealing with the work state, in other words. So now we're going to call a function yet to be built, which is going to hide the clock, and we want clock ID, and that should handle this conditional. And let's see here, we have this function, so everything should actually be going inside of here. I don't want this to sit out by itself. I'm just going to push it over, so command right bracket, and then I can drop our closing function brace down there. Okay, so we are still inside of this switch mode conditional. We're going to have an else. Let's see here. I think we can just put that here. Else. And in this case, we're going to decrement. And to do that, we're going to call our clock array. You can see a lot of this just centers around this clock array because that is the current clock. And we're always dealing with the current clock. So clock array, clock ID. Big time is going to be -1. And that handles this particular function for the counter. Okay, so now we're going to move into creating the functions for our long break and for our short break as well. So first one here, I'm just going to do long break. The function is kind of self-descriptive as well. And we can do counter long break. We'll do long break, actually long clock ID. So similar to what we had above, it's going to be our indexer. And we are going to have a start off similar to our counter function where we're basically breaking this into component parts for the break. So we have our long clock ID, and I'm not going to copy and paste, although the code is very similar to what we used in the beginning of our counter function, just because I don't want to end up leaving something in there from the pasted code. So just typing everything out, I can be sure I've got all the correct variables. All right, so we have our clock ID. We want our long clock ID as the index. We'll do long break val and divide that by 60. There we have our minutes. And now I can do a copy and paste, a little bit safer here. And this is going to be SECS. This will change. We're going to have our clock array dot long break minus clock array long clock ID, and mins times 60. All right, so we keep going, and now we're going to change the HTML value. So this is going to follow a similar pattern to the counter function, and you probably have already guessed that the sharp break is going to follow a similar pattern as well. So these three functions are following similar patterns. All right, so we're going to have change the HTML to show new minutes and seconds. All right, so now that we have that, we can start on this other segment, and I notice one issue up here using clock ID when I really want to be using this ID. Okay, so now we're getting into the part where we're going to start getting data from the view, or actually manipulating it. So change the HTML on the view is basically what that is. So we're not getting it from the view, we're going to manipulate. And to do that, we're going to go back with our clock array. We're going to make use of the ID we have inside of this function, and we're going to start with our minutes. And it's going to be inner HTML. So we're going to follow, again, a similar pattern here, and this will be long clock ID, and then mins, which is, we're going back with, this is just to help with formatting. So if it's 10, then 0, else we're going to do blank. And we also, this would be a plus, go back with our clock array, long clock ID. And what we're going to do here is get minutes. And so now we can copy this. We're going to go with our seconds. So this right here is seconds. This is SECS. So is this. And everything pretty much is going to follow the same there. All right, so here we're again looking for that switch modes if timer ends. So for this conditional, be similar to what we've already seen. So clock array, and we want to do our long clock ID, long break value, if it is 0, and we're going to handle that condition. So we want a clear interval, and this is going to pass in our array with the countdown timer, clock array, long clock ID, and we have our countdown ID that goes in with it. And then next what we're going to do is set a value on our countdown. So we're going to set interval. So this is going to be clock array, and we're going to go back, and off of the array we're going to get, this is going to be long, we're going to get the countdown. So here we're going to say countdown ID equals, we'll have our set interval, which then needs counter current running clock, comma 1000. Well, we don't need that. Let's see if I have something off. So the parenthesis goes inside of the quote, and we don't have that function built out yet. So it will better explain what's going on here once we actually see the parameter list coming in. But now we're going to finish this one off with our else. So in here, this is just a one-liner. We want to decrement, and we're going to do clock array, long clock ID, and that is going to be long break value is going to equal our clock array, long clock ID, and long break val is -1. So one is if we hit 0, then we're going to reset, and over here else we're just going to decrement. So that should complete that function. That is our counter long break, and what we have is another function that's going to handle counter. I'm just going to do long break here and change this to sharp. All right, and then we're going to get into that one in our next lesson. I'm just going to clear all of this out so we have a clean slate down there. So next we'll get into sharp break, and then we start getting into some of the action functions. Those are going to be things like starting the timer and resetting the timer. We'll also have where we're going to stop our timer. We need to handle the hiding of any clock. We have sounds that we need to work with, and then that will complete this back end piece, and we should have a fully functional Pomodoro clock. So that's what we're going to be moving into going forward. We left off with the start of our short break here. Now, because these are following the same pattern, so we have our long break, we have our regular counter, just kind of following the same patterns, I'm going to go ahead and copy from our long break and paste it into our short break. And we'll remove the integrated terminal since we don't actually need that right now. And this is just really going to save us having to sit through all the typing, because now we've got a good idea how these patterns are going to go. So there's just some things we're going to have to change, of course, to make short break work. So I'm going to use a variable short clock ID, and this is what we're going to replace for our indexer. So here and here, we'll have it here as well. And again, this is minutes and seconds. Those are all getting calculated the same way. And let's see here, we have long clock there. This is one of the potential issues of just doing this copy and paste, because if you leave one of these IDs, and it's very easy to do, then you're going to have a problem that can be difficult to track down. So I think I've got them all at this point. Okay, so just going over, looking at this, it's going to be pretty much the same as what we had for everything else. So here we have our current running clock. That's going to be 1,000. We do our decrement. This is going to be short break. So this is one to look for, because I don't think that's getting updated. And this is going to be short break. And you can see here I've got long clock ID for the indexer there. So what I want to do is make sure my variables coming off of the array are the correct ones. Here's long break again. All right, there's long break. And I think I've got them. So our indexers are looking good. I'm going to go ahead and save that. So hopefully that will not cause any issues and I didn't miss anything in here. So what we're going to do now is get into the actions section. So we're going to start off with our start timer. After that one, we're going to go into a restart timer. Okay, so the first one of these, we're going to have a start timer. And we're going to pass in an ID string. Let's see, I'm just put this here. So what we're going to do is extract the integer value from the ID of the clock div. And we're going to use a little bit of regex to do that. So let's go ahead with some comments here. So extract the integer value from the ID of the clock div. So we'll create a clock ID here, ID string, and we're going to do a replace. So what we're going to do is regex here. So I'm doing / /d plus / g, comma, and that's going to create the replace. So this is going to be basic regex, and then down here we're going to do, we're going to look for the current running clock. And what I'm going to do here with this comment is just say it means the clock is already running, or actually we can just say it's running or in running state, either one of these. So with that, we're looking for if we're going to do current running clock equals this clock ID that we're passing in. So if that is the case, we're going to do alert and display a message to the user. So we're going to say something like, the clock is already running. Please click reset if you want to start again, or click restart if you want to restart from the previous counter. So no actions here actually besides this, just this alert. So the clock is already running. Please click reset if you want to start again, or click restart if you want to restart the previous counter. Have some misspellings here. I'm just going to clean up. And let's see here. This is a want. Okay, so that is the conditional. We're also going to do another conditional down here, looking for that invalid value of -1. Okay, so if we get this one, we're going to go back with our clock array using clock ID, and we're going to say clock is running, and then we're going to need to set some state on that. So we're going to have our clock array. This is going to have clock ID. And so the message, so let's see, we should have message ID. It's going to be an inner HTML, and we're going to do clock is running. So if that is the case, we have an isStarted variable coming off this array. We're going to set it to true. So going back with clock array, we have clock ID isStarted is true. So setting up our state here, then the current running clock is going to be the clock ID. So now we reset this variable to just clock ID. Okay, so now the state is set. We're going to do some manipulations for what's going to be displayed while the clock is going. So for that, we're going to go back with our array here and get clock ID, and we're going to say message. Oops. Here we're going to say countdown, not message. So countdown ID, this is going to use our set interval. I'm going to pass in counter clock ID and 1000. Then we're going to have a message. So going back with our array here, we're going to do clock ID. And this one here should be capital I. So what we want to do in this case is the message. And we're going to say slow and steady wins something. So slow and steady wins, or we can just say all the time. And that will complete this conditional. So we are going to have one more conditional. So if the clock is not equal to the clock ID and the clock running is not equal to -1, then we're just going to display an alert. We're just going to tell them in that case, please stop the already running clock to start this, or start this clock. So that is a valid condition. So we're going to do current running clock is not equal to clock ID, and current running clock not equal to -1. And this is just going to be an alert. This condition happens to come up. So we'll say, please stop the already running clock to start this one. All right, so that is our start timer. So we're going to move now into another action function. So this is going to be where we're resetting the timer, and it's going to be restart timer. We're going to use another variable here, ID string. So for this, we're going to do another extract from the value of the ID in the clock div. And what we want to do then is check if the current clock is running, and then the timer is going to be reset. And this div, just so we can understand what we're doing. So here we have our divs down in here. You can see this is where the clock ID that we're getting is. So we use this clock underscore, then we had our ID, which makes things easier to deal with to get just the ID, because you can basically parse on that underscore. All right, so back here in restart timer, we're going to actually stop here. This is a good point to stop. And then we're going to come back and go ahead and create this function. It's not quite as involved as the other, because really we're just going to display a couple alerts if something happens that the clock is already running. There's two scenarios that's going to happen, but the function is not quite as involved. Then once we create this one, there's a few other functions that we're going to go into, and that's going to likely happen a little bit later in the next video.